Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. Real quick before we get into the tutorial, as you can tell, I'm doing two tutorials. One is going to be of this version of this top, so it has like two little panels of your little mesh bottom, and then the second is just a plain straight down one mesh panel version. I will leave timestamps so you guys know where the differences come in between the two tops and how you can, tackle those. But both of these tops start off exactly the same, so I'll point out when those differences arise. I really tried my hardest to make sure that the tutorial was easy to follow, so if there are any points where you guys get confused, leave a comment. I'll try to answer as many different questions as you guys have as possible. And yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and let's go ahead and get on into it. So the supplies I used to complete this project is my 4mm crochet hook. I absolutely love this thing. I also used up 2 skeins of this yarn. It's a weight 4 yarn. I got it from Hobby Lobby. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say, but this is the yarn that I used. And then the other 2 things you're going to need to complete this project are just a pair of scissors and a darning needle. So we're going to start off by making our cups. These are going to be the same regardless of which top variation you are doing. So you're going to go ahead and create a slip knot, and then you're going to make a chain that is long enough to reach from your side, so like the side of your rib cage, to the center of your boob, so like your nipple. And whatever that length is for you, just go ahead and make that amount of chains. For me, I did 14 chains. Okay, so as I mentioned, this number is going to be different for everyone, but after you have your number, you're going to go ahead and chain an additional 2 chains. And then in the 3rd stitch from your hook, you're going to put 1 double crochet into that stitch, and then 1 double crochet into every stitch across your row. Okay, so now I'm putting my last double crochet into that last stitch, but this is actually going to be like the curved point of our work, or of our cup. So you're going to go ahead and put 1 more double crochet into that same stitch, and then you're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work our way back around the other end of this piece. So you're going to put 2 more double crochets into the same stitch. This is what your work should look like so far. And what we're going to do from here is we're going to turn our work on the other side, and we're going to put 1 double crochet into the other side of each of these double crochets we just did. And this is going to make our work symmetrical on both sides. So make sure you go into the very first stitch and then put 1 double crochet into every stitch after until you get to the end of the row. And to make sure that these are even, you can count how many stitches you had on the one side and then just make sure that you have the same amount going along the other side. Alrighty, so now I'm going to go back and I'm just going to count all of my stitches to make sure that I have the same amount of stitches on each side. So I'm going to count starting right here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then I have my chain one space, which marks, the end of just that one side. So then I should be able to count 15 stitches along the other way as well. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so I know that I have the equal amount on both sides. So now I'm going to move into my next row, which to do this, I'm going to turn my work. And in the very first stitch, I'm going to put one single crochet into that stitch. And then in this single crochet, you should be able to see like there's two little loops there. You're going to reach into the back of the second loop and you're going to put another single crochet there. And this is going to count as our double crochet and it's going to help keep our side straight. And then from here, all you have to do is go ahead and put one double crochet into every single stitch along your row until you reach your chain one space. I'm reaching the end of my row. I just have one more stitch that I have to do before I get to the chain one space. So I put my last double crochet in there. And then in the chain space, we're going to put 2 double crochets. Then you're going to chain 1 and you're going to put 2 more double crochets into that same stitch. And then as we did before, we're going to work our way down along the other end with 1 double crochet into each stitch. And the amount of stitches you have on each side should be symmetrical. So if you need to, you can go back and count how many stitches you had leading up to that chain 1, and that's how many stitches you need to have going along the other side. We already did our first 2, which are those 2 stitches that are in that same chain space, and then you just continue on from there to get the total amount of stitches you need on the other side. This is what your work should look like once you reach the end of this row, and you're just going to repeat this pattern back and forth until you have enough rows to cover your chest. So just to be on the safe side, I'll do the next row with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our work, and then in that very first stitch you are going to put 2 single crochets, like one atop the other. So first single crochet goes into the stitch, and then in the second loop on that single crochet you're going to put your second single crochet, and then from there you can just put 1 double crochet into every single stitch until you get to that chain 1 space. Then you're going to do 2 double crochets, a chain 1, 2 more double crochets, and then from there you'll be able to work your way down the other end of your project. So go ahead and do that, and then I will meet you guys once you have gotten to your desired cup size. This is what my cup looks like. I ended up doing 6 rows, which for me is more than enough to cover my chest. So now we're going to be working on the back panel of your top. So from here, I'm going to be putting double crochets along this straight edge over here. And this is going to be the part that will wrap around your side and to your back. So go ahead and turn your work, and in any space you can fit your hook, put 1 double crochet along the length of your cup. And whatever this number ends up being for you, make sure that you take note of it because you're going to have to repeat it for your second cup. So starting in this corner here, I'm just going to reach in whatever space I can, manage, and I'm going to put 1 double crochet all the way along the length of the straight edge here. So keep going and I'll meet you guys at the other end of this row. I've reached the end of my row. I had 25 double crochets, so I went and wrote that down. And now what we're going to do is turn our work, and in the very first stitch we're going to put our little stacked single crochets into that first stitch, and this is going to count as our first double crochet for this next row. And then we're going to do one double crochet down the row until you have 2 stitches left. So once you reach those last 2 stitches, stop there and I'll show you what comes next. Alright, so I've now reached my last 2 stitches, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up a loop in that first stitch, and then I'm going to pull up another loop in that second stitch, that last stitch, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops, then yarn over again and pull through the remaining 2. Then from there you're going to chain 1 and you're going to turn your work. And that's going to be how we do our decrease on that side. Now working our way back down the other side, you're going to pull up a loop in the very first stitch, which is the decrease, and then we'll pull up a loop in the next stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 stitches, or 2 loops, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. And then from there you can continue on as normal and put 1 double crochet into every stitch down the row till you get all the way to the other end. Okay, so I'm now reaching the end of this row, so I'm going to finish up this last stitch here. And then once that's done, you can start to see how your decreasing side starts to curve in a bit, while the other end, we want it to remain straight. So for the next row, you're going to turn your work, and in the very first stitch, we're going to put our 2 stacked single crochets, one atop the other. That's going to count as our first double crochet of this round, or excuse me, of this row. And then we're going to do 1 double crochet all the way down the row until you have 2 stitches left, and that's going to be where we do our next decrease. So as you can see, I'm at the last 2 stitches of this row. So to decrease, I'm going to pull up a loop in each of these last 2 stitches. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2, then yarn over, pull through the remaining 2. Then you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. Now starting off the row with a decrease on this side, you're going to reach into the very first stitch and pull up a loop. Then go into the next stitch and pull up a loop. Then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Yarn over again, pull through the remaining 2 loops. And then you can continue on with doing your double crochets all the way down to the end of your row. You will be repeating this 2-row decrease until you have enough rows to reach from the side of your rib cage to not totally the center of your back. You only want to make it long enough to go about 1/3 of the way. Otherwise, you risk making your top too big and then you won't be able to do the lace back. So I completed my rows. I ended up doing 12 rows in total. I honestly could have done a little less because the top stretches, but just go back and forth until you have your desired length. Now for me, I ended up on the straight edge, but I want to be up here at this corner of my like slanted edge. So to get over to this corner, I'm going to slip stitch my way over to this point here. If you ended off in this slanted corner, you have nothing to worry about. You don't have to do this next step. It's just for those who are in the same boat as me. We're going to go ahead and slip stitch into every stitch until we get over to this corner. I don't recommend doing another row of double crochets because then you can end up making your top too big and the lace back won't be of any use at that point. Okay, so now that I'm in the correct corner, we will now be working on the distance from the base of your cup to the end of this row. And I'm going to be putting single crochets in any space I see along here. These single crochets aren't going to count towards anything, so you don't have to keep track of how many you do. So what this ends up doing is giving this edge a cleaner look. We don't want it to look bumpy, that's all. So go ahead and finish up and I will meet you guys at the base of the cup over here. Alrighty, I made it up here and I stopped right before I got to the very first stitch of this cup. So in the next stitch, which is the first stitch at the base of my cup, this is where we're going to start our shell pattern. So put one single crochet into the first stitch and then skip the next 2 stitches, and in that third stitch put 5 double crochets. Then from there you will skip the next 2 stitches and single crochet into the third stitch. So I just did my 5 double crochets. I'm now skipping 2 stitches, and in the third I'm putting that single crochet, and that's your scalloped stitch that we're going to be doing from now on. So skip the next 2 stitches, and in the third put 5 double crochets, then skip the next 2 stitches, and in the third stitch put 1 single crochet. And you're going to repeat that until you get to the chain 1 space at the tip of this cup here. So go ahead and keep continuing on with the cell stitch until you reach that point. Now I've made my way down to this point, and I managed to only have 1 stitch left before the chain 1 space, but if you don't have enough space to do a complete shell stitch in these last few stitches here, just single crochet your way to the chain 1 space. Don't bother trying to squeeze in another shell cluster because it might look strange at the end. But once you have that, you're going to go ahead and grab your scissors and you're going to cut a long tail, and then from there just chain 1 and pull through that end, or pull that end through nice and tight. Alright, so now your first cup is done. Go ahead and repeat all these steps again and make your second panel. Alright, so here I have both of my cups and now we will connect them. So take one of your tails here, and what I'm going to do is take that tail and I'm going to use it to slip stitch the center 3 stitches together. So match up your pieces, and then the stitches I'm going to go into are the stitch right before the chain 1 space, the chain 1 space itself, and the stitch right after it. So now that my panels are paired up, using one end I'm pulling through the stitch right before the chain 1 space on both panels, and then I'm slip stitching into the chain 1 space and slip stitching into the stitch right after it. Then I'm going to chain 1, pull through my work and pull it nice and tight. And then from there we can use our darning needle and we're going to weave these ends back and forth to hide these tails in our work. Now that that part is done, we can start to work on the mesh bottom. So flip your work upside down. We're going to be working on the side without the scalloped edge. And we're going to put 1 single crochet into every stitch along this end. And to make our lives easier for the next part, make sure that your total number of single crochets is a multiple of 3. So however many stitches it takes you to get from one end to the other, please make sure that it is divisible by 3. If not, it's fine, you can just add the extra stitch or 2 at the end of your row. So in one of your corners, it doesn't matter which you start off in, you're going to go ahead and take your yarn and attach it into that corner. And then in that same stitch, put your first single crochet. And then in every stitch along the length of your row, put 1 single crochet. And please just make sure that your final number is a multiple of 3. So work your way down to the other end and I'll meet you guys there. I just finished putting my single crochets along this side of my work, and this is going to be the base of our mesh panel, but we're only going to be working this mesh panel from one corner to the spot right past the cup of the second panel. We're not going to touch this part over here. That is, unless you're working on the white version of this top. The white version works from end to end, so regardless of which top you make, you're still going to follow this next part of the tutorial. The only thing that changes is how far over you work that mesh stitch. So for your mesh panel, you need to chain 6. And make sure you turn your work. And not including those 6 additional chains we just did, you're going to skip 5 stitches and then you're going to double crochet into the 6th stitch. Then you're going to chain 3, skip the next 2 stitches, and in the 3rd you're going to put your next double crochet. And then you're going to repeat that again, so then you'll chain another 3, or excuse me, yeah, you'll chain another 3 stitches, skip the next 2 stitches, and in the 3rd stitch put your next double crochet. And you're just going to keep repeating that until you get to either the end of your row, if you're making the white version of this top, or just keep going until you reach the side of the second cup if you're making this green version. So I'm reaching the end of this cup, so I'll finish up by putting in my last double crochet into that last little space there. So for the next row we're going to be doing our decreases, so chain 6 and turn your work. And then skipping the very first chain space, because this is going to be our decrease, we're going to do 1 double crochet into the second chain space. Then from there you're going to chain 3 and double crochet into the next chain space. Chain another 3 and double crochet into the chain space after that. And you're just going to keep repeating that until you reach the end of your row. I will meet you guys there. I'm at the end of my row. All I have is this last chain space, so I'm going to chain 3 and put my last double crochet into this chain space. Then I'm going to chain 6, turn my work, I'm going to skip this first chain space and double crochet into the second chain space. Then I'll chain 3 and double crochet into the chain space after that. Chain another 3 and then double crochet into the next chain space. And keep repeating that until you get to the end of your row. And this is what your row should start looking like. You should be able to see the effect of your decreases. So just keep repeating this pattern back and forth for however many rows you need until you have 1 mesh box left. Here I just wanted to take a second to show you what my work was looking like so far after I've done several rows. So I started off in one corner and then I went straight across to the other side of this cup here for the green top. And as you can see, you keep working that mesh pattern down your rows, and this is what it starts looking like. So keep working that decreasing mesh row repeat until you have just one mesh chain space left. Okay, so I made it all the way to the end from one corner to the other. I repeated that decrease pattern, and now I have just one mesh chain space left up here. So now what I'm going to do, or what you're going to need to do, is chain one, cut your work, and then pull that end through nice and tight. And then from there we can start working on the shell stitch that is going to go around this mesh panel. So to make the shell border, go ahead and reattach your yarn in the same stitch that you started your mesh panel, and it doesn't matter which side you start on. So I'm going ahead and I'm attaching my yarn in this corner point right here. Then in the very first chain space, you're going to put 5 double crochets. Then in the next chain space, I'm going to put 1 single crochet, and then in the chain space after that, I'm going to go ahead and put 5 more double crochets in there. Then 1 single crochet into the next chain space, 5 double crochets in the chain space after that, one single crochet into the next chain space, and this is what your work should look like so far. So just go ahead and repeat that until you reach the point of the panel, like down here at this little bottom space down there. Alright, so I put my 5 double crochets into the stitch right before this point. So now in this bottom point we're going to put 3 of our shell clusters. So first I have to put my little single crochet into, I don't know what to call this, but this little like bar right here, or this little stitch if that's what you want to call it. And then moving into this point right here, I'm going to start off with 5 double crochets. Then 1 single crochet, that's our first shell, 5 more double crochets for our second shell, and another single crochet, and we're going to do 1 more shell into this same corner point. So push your work over a little bit if you need to make some space, but you're going to put you're going to put 5 more double crochets in there, So this is what the bottom space now looks like. And next I have to do my single crochet, so I just put it in like the actual stitch or this little bar, whatever you want to call it, not in the chain space itself. And then in the very next chain space, I'm going to continue on with my shell pattern, 5 double crochets in the next chain space, and then in the following chain space, a single crochet. Keep doing that until you reach the other end of this panel. Okay, and I made it all the way down the other end, and now I just have this last chain space. So I'm going to go ahead and put my last 5 double crochets in there. And then I'm going to single crochet into the side stitch here. I'll chain 1 and cut my work. If you're making the white version of this top, please skip to the timestamp on the screen for your next step. So now that our larger mesh panel is done, we can move on to our smaller panel. And the smaller mesh panel is going to reach from one end of your top to the corner of the larger panel, and then we'll work our way down from there. So attach your yarn to the outer corner of your top. And start off by making a chain of 6 like we did for our larger panel. Then you're going to skip the next 5 stitches and double crochet into the 6th stitch. And no, you are not counting that chain of 6 that we just did. After you double crochet into the 6th stitch, chain 3, skip the next 2 stitches in the 3rd stitch, put your next double crochet, then you're going to chain another 3 and double crochet into the 3rd stitch from there. And you're just going to keep repeating that pattern until you reach the side of your larger panel. Okay, so as you can see, I chained 3 and I have 3 stitches left, but I'm actually going to skip those and slip stitch into the center of this shell stitch here. And this is what your row should look like. And now I need to work my way back over. So I'm going to single crochet, or excuse me, I'm going to slip stitch my way over to the single crochet that sits in between my 2 shell stitches here. So that's going to be 3 slip stitches to get me over to the single crochet. And then you're going to chain 6 and turn your work. And then continuing on with the mesh pattern, I'm going to put 1 double crochet into this very first chain space, then chain 3, and continue on with the mesh pattern until you reach the end of your row. Okay, so I'm at my last chain space, so I'm going to put my last double crochet in there. And then I'm going to chain 6 and turn my work. And for the next few rows, I'm just going to be continuing this 2-row repeat, and you'll start to see how your work gets smaller as we go. But so for the next row, we're going to work our way towards the large mesh panel. So we just chained 6 and turned our work. So now we're going to skip the first chain space and put 1 double crochet into the second chain space. Then chain 3 and double crochet into the following chain space. And go ahead and repeat that until you get to the other end of this row. Okay, so now I'm at my last chain space, so I'll double crochet into that last chain space there. But instead of chaining 3, I'm actually going to chain 5 this time to help keep this corner flat. I don't want it to get bunched up. So go ahead and chain 5. And then skipping the next 3 stitches as well as the first 2 stitches of your shell stitch, or of your shell, you're going to slip stitch into the 3rd stitch, which is that like top point of your shell. And then that'll be the end of this row. Then moving our way up so we can do the next row, you're going to slip stitch into 3 spaces so you can make your way over to that single crochet stitch that sits in between those 2 shell stitches. Then once you're there, you're going to go ahead and chain 6 and turn your work. And now I'm going to work my way back to the other end. So put 1 double crochet in the very first chain space. Chain 3. Put 1 double crochet in the next chain space and repeat this until you reach the end of your row. And I will meet you guys there. Okay, so I have 1 chain space left, so I'm going to finish this off with my chain 3 and then double crochet into that last chain space. And that's the end of our next row. So now I'm going to chain 6 and turn my work once again. And we want this side to continue like decreasing. As you can see, it kind of has like a little slant to it. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to skip the very first chain space and double crochet into the second chain space. Then I'm going to chain 3 and double crochet into the next chain space and repeat that all the way to this corner. Then I'm going to chain 5, slip stitch into the top of my shell. Then I'm going to slip stitch 3 spaces over so I get over to the single crochet stitch. Then chain 6, turn my work, and work my way back down the row. And I'm going to keep doing this where I'm attaching my mesh stitch over into the side of my shell stitches for a total of 5 shells. When we get to the 6th stitch, we're going to break off from there and then let the mesh pattern work its way to a point. So I finished the remainder of those rows that connected to the larger panel, and I ended up doing a total of 10 rows, so I can count them up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now I chained 6 and I'm going to work my way back into this corner, but this time I'm not going to connect into the shell. I'm going to let my work break off and I'll continue the mesh pattern until I'm left with just one like mesh chain space left. So at the end of this last row I chained 6 and turned my work. Now I'm going to skip the first chain space and double crochet into the second chain space. Chain 3, double crochet into the following chain space, and I'm going to just keep going and work my way down to the final chain space. Alright, I'm at my last chain space, but this time we won't connect our work to the shell, so I've got to put my last double crochet into this chain space, and then I'm going to go ahead and chain 6, and this is where our work is going to break off. Gonna turn my work, and then I'll work my way back across the row. So skipping the first chain space, put 1 double crochet into the second chain space, then chain 3, double crochet into the following stitch, or excuse me, the following chain space, and just repeat that until you reach the end of your row. Okay, I'm at the end of my row, putting my last double crochet into that last chain space, and then I'm chaining 6, turning my work, and I'm going to continue to work my mesh pattern back and forth down the other end of my row. Just keep continuing until I have 1 chain space left. Alright, so now I've made it all the way down to this point. So what I have to do now is chain 1, cut my yarn, and then pull that end tight to secure it. And now we can work on adding the shell stitch onto this smaller panel, and I'm going to start in the corner of my top where like your larger panel and your smaller panel meet, and I will work my way out and around to the outer edge of my top. So grabbing my yarn once again, I'm going to reattach my yarn to this corner of my work. And then to start off the shell, I'm going to put 5 double crochets into this first chain space. Then in the next chain space, I'm going to put 1 single crochet, and then follow that up with 5 double crochets into the next chain space. And then you're going to go ahead and put 1 single crochet into the next chain space, and just keep repeating that until you get to the top point down here. So I will meet you guys down there. Alright, I am now at my point. So here I'm going to need to put 3 double crochets separated by a single crochet. So in this little bar I'm going to put my single crochet, And then in this chain space, I'm going to put my 3 sets of my shell stitch, and then I will put my single crochet into this other bar space on the other side, and then work my way back down the other end of my top. So I did my first set of 5 double crochets, then I'm going to single crochet, slide those over a little bit, do another set, 5 double crochets, then single crochet, got one more set of 5 double crochets to go in this one little point. I put my single crochet into this little like bar stitch thing right here, but as you're going to see in a second, I'm actually going to take it out because it's just going to make my stitches look weird. But I'm prepping to work my way down the other side. So as I notice, as you can see here, that I'm getting ready to put a shell stitch in there, but it's going to make it look really bunched up. So I went back and I took out that single crochet, and I just decided to put that single crochet into the next chain space. And then in the next stitch, I continued on with my 5 double crochets, and I just worked my way all the way down to the end of my top. So I just finished working my way down to the other side. So to finish this up, I'm going to put my last 5 double crochets into this chain space. Then I'm going to single crochet into this corner stitch right here. And then from there, I'm going to chain 1 and cut my work. Now what I'm going to do is just go back and weave in any loose ends that I see hanging out on my project before I move into the next step. Next up, we will be making the straps that will lace up the back of your top, as well as the tie that goes on the front of your top if you want that halter type of look. So for this, you just need to crochet a long chain. I did mine the length of my tape measure, so it was 60 inches, and I'm just going to go ahead and make 2 of them, but however long you want them, it's your call. Now this is the back of my work, and what I'm going to do is weave one of my chains in between every few double crochets. There's no real math to this. You can just lace them back and forth as many times as you want until you get your desired look. So then flip your work over and take your second chain, and what you're going to do is you're going to use your hook and you're going to pull your work through the center of your 2 cups. Now the last bit we have to do is make the rose that sits in the center of our top here, and the way we're going to do it, it won't be permanently attached, so you can take it off as well as the halter strap if you ever choose to. So to make your rose, you're going to start off with a chain of 60. Then in the 4th stitch from your hook, you're going to put 1 double crochet into that stitch. Then chain 4 and put 1 more double crochet into that same stitch. Then skip the next 3 stitches and double crochet into the 4th. Chain 4 and put 1 double crochet into the same stitch. Then again skip the next 3 stitches and double crochet into the 4th stitch. Chain 4 and put 1 more double crochet into that same stitch. Then you're just going to repeat that pattern until you get to the end of your row. I'm now at the end of my row. I'm going to finish up my last double crochet. Then I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. So for the next row, you're going to yarn over and put 10 double crochets into this very first chain space. Then in this next smaller kind of space, it kind of sits kind of below it, you're going to put 1 single crochet. And then in the next chain 4 space, you're going to put 10 double crochets. Then follow that up by putting 1 single crochet in that little small space. And then just keep repeating that until you reach the end of your row. Okay, so I made it down my row, and all I have left is this little like chain space here. So what I'm going to do is put my last single crochet there. Then I'm going to chain 1 and cut my work, but make sure you leave a long tail. We're going to need it for the next step. Now starting from the end with your shorter tail, what we're going to do is start wrapping our petals like around each other until your rose starts to look the way you want it. You may have to play around with it a little bit at first for it to start looking right, but just go ahead and keep wrapping them around and around until it starts to look like a rose. And then once it looks the way you want, you're going to flip your work over and you're going to thread your darning needle through the long tail. And what you're going to do is weave that tail through the layers of your flower so you can like hold your rose together. Just make sure you go through all of the layers of your rose or else it'll unravel. Now that my rose is secure, I'm going to go ahead and make my way over to this shorter tail, and I'm just going to tie the two ends together. Then I'm going to pull my two tails through my work a few times and then just cut whatever remains. Now we can attach our flower onto our top. So pull your top back out, and using your hook, you're going to pull one end of your halter strap through the bottom of your rose, and then just tie those two ends together to help hold your rose in place. And that's it. I hope you were able to follow this tutorial well, and I hope you enjoy your new mesh top. Make sure to tag me in any photos you post of your tops. I'd really like to see what colors you guys do your tops in. And make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye guys!